John Damascene says, therefore, as St. John Damascene said, therefore we cannot demonstrate God exists. Okay, so basically he's saying that in order to demonstrate that something exists, you have to be able to demonstrate its essence. What is at its core? Okay? Alright, so that's the second argument. Now the third argument. Further, if the existence of God were demonstrated, this could only be from his effects. But his effects are not proportionate to him, since he is infinite, and his effects are finite. And between the finite and the infinite, there is no proportion. Therefore, since a cause cannot be demonstrated by an effect not proportionate to it, it seems that the existence of God cannot be demonstrated. So, basically what they're saying, what he's saying here as a way of analogy, we cannot speak adequately about God. Why? Because our language is finite and God is infinite. Our language, in other words, is inadequate to speak fully about God. Okay? That's what they're saying. And since, basically what his argument, as a way of analogy, the argument would be, since our language is inadequate to speak about God, then we can't say anything about God. Okay? What this argument is suggesting is that because God, the cause, is so much greater than the effect, then it's pointless to point to an effect in order to demonstrate the existence of the cause, because it's inadequate. Does that make sense? It's inadequate. It doesn't do the job. It's not big enough to do the job. All right. Then, yes?
Chesterton said it best when he said, faith is believing in the unbelievable.
We're getting there, Dorothy.
Thomas, I think he thinks too much.
I think you're going to be okay. Give him a little bit more time, and I think you're going to be okay with Thomas. Okay? Give him a little bit more time here. You're still ahead of me.
Why am I so impatient?
It's because we're running out of time, that's why.
Oh, but you know, if you can...
No, she's looking at her. I don't think that's what Jean meant.
If you can believe that a 14-year-old virgin was impregnated by a ghost, you can believe anything. So it's faith. It all comes back to faith in everything. As far as
We're getting there.
Okay.
I promise you we're getting there.
Okay.
All right. So then he says, Thomas famously says, what?
On the
On the contrary. The apostle says, now who's the apostle? We know who the philosopher is. Who's the apostle? Paul. Paul is the apostle. Again, don't even have to say his name. The apostle says, the invisible things of him are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made. Are you cold? I'm sorry. Oh, okay. All right. So he quotes from Paul's letter to the Romans. But this would not be unless the existence of God could be demonstrated through the things that are made. For the first we must know of anything is whether it exists. Now that is so obvious we miss it. The first we must know of anything is that it exists. Because if it didn't exist, we wouldn't know it. We couldn't possibly know it. Okay? Even things that are mythical, like unicorns and
Dragons.
Dragons. Okay, thank you. They exist in our imagination, okay? But they don't exist in actuality. All right? So we can't really know a unicorn, which is why we can let our imaginations go free, okay, in creating unicorns. But the first thing we must know about anything is that it exists. I answer that when an effect is better known to us than its cause. Okay, so Thomas basically says two things. We can know something. We're good here? Okay. We can know something exists from one of two ways in terms of the relationship between cause and effect. We can know the effect, and from that we can deduce I'm sorry. I apologize. Let me go backwards. I'm going backwards. We can know the cause, and from that we can deduce the effect. Or we can experience the effect, and from that deduce the existence of the cause. This is how we know God exists. Not this way. Because we don't know the cause. God is too much. He's too infinite. He's too great for us to know Him truly as He is, at least in this temporal realm. Okay? So we're left with this. We see the effects of God, and from that we deduce His existence. Okay? We conclude His existence. When an effect is known better than its cause, we know the effects of God's existence, right? Better than we know God. Because God is infinite. He's too great. We don't know Him the way we will know Him. So we know His effects better. We can study trees. We can study baboons. We can study the human body. Okay? We can study the earth. We can study the things that God creates and know them better than we can know God. At least, again, in this temporal realm.
But we can postulate and have postulated.
Yes, but that's all we can do, as opposed to knowing.
Yes.
Okay?
I think that's what Doris
So,
said, right?
when an effect is better known to us than its cause, from the effect we proceed to the knowledge of the cause. And from every effect, the existence of its proper cause can be demonstrated, so long as its effects are better known to us. Because since every effect depends upon its cause, if the effect exists, the cause must pre-exist. Hence, the existence of God, insofar as it is not self-evident to us, can be demonstrated from those of His effects which are known to us. Okay? Hence, the existence of God, insofar as it is not self-evident to us, can be demonstrated from those of His effects which are known to us. We know God's effects, so we can conclude His existence. In the same way that everyone here, I can say with absolute certainty, everyone in here has a mother. Everyone in this room has a mother. Why? Because people don't come from any place else. Okay? We don't just poof, pop into existence. Everybody here has a mother. Do I know your mother? Do I know your mother? Have I met your mother? No. But I know she exists because I know you do. It's that simple. It's that simple. Reply objection 1. The existence of God and other like truths about God, which can be known by natural reason, are not articles of faith. The existence of God is not an article of faith. Why? Because we can know God's existence by reason. You don't need faith in order to know that God exists. Our creed does not begin, I believe in God. Our creed begins, I believe in God, the Father. Okay? We know God exists. That's knowledge. Because we don't need faith to know that God exists. We do need faith to know that God is our Father. Okay? Faith is what we believe about the God whose existence reason demonstrates. So you do need faith, but not to know that God exists. And this is the teaching of the church since St. Paul wrote his letter to the Romans. You don't need faith to know that God exists. All you need is a brain that works. Because you can know God exists by reason. In the same way that I know that everyone in this room has a mother. In the same way that I know somebody made this chair. Do I know who did? No. Will I ever know who did? No. But I know somebody did. Because it didn't just pop there. Does that make sense? I don't need faith to believe that your mothers exist or did exist. I don't need faith to believe that the person who made this chair exists. Now, what do I know about, what do I believe about your mother? I believe that James's mother was a very patient woman.
Still is.
But I don't know that about her. I believe that about her from what I know of James. Does that make sense? But I know she exists. I know she exists. So, faith is not necessary to hold for the existence of God. But then Aquinas says this, and this is I think is lovely. Nevertheless, there is nothing to prevent a man who cannot grasp a proof of accepting, as a matter of faith, something which in itself is capable of being known and demonstrated. In other words, if Thomas's arguments for the existence of God don't work for you, you can believe that God exists based on your faith. Isn't that nice? That's kind of nice that he thought about that. You know, not everybody's a philosopher. Not everybody can grasp these arguments. Some people look, I'm not sure I get that, but I still believe that God exists. And Thomas says that's okay. That's all right. You can go there. Okay? You can go there. All right. Then, reply objection 2. Remember that the objection 2 was you have to know the essence of something in order to demonstrate its existence. Basically, Thomas says, no, you don't. I won't read it. Thomas says, basically, no, you don't need to know the essence of something in order to know that it exists. Okay? Because existence precedes essence. Okay? So let's consider. You're enjoying a picnic lunch in the park. Okay? And you hear wafting through the air the melodious tunes of the Ave Maria. Where's it coming from? I don't know. You get up. You look around. All of a sudden it kind of dissipates and it stops. You find a gazebo. In that gazebo is a music stand with music and a violin case. What do you know? What do you know about this situation? Think about it. What do you know? Not what you believe. What do you know happened?
Somebody was playing.
Somebody was playing the Ave. You know that violinist exists. Was it a man? Was it a woman? Was it a child? Were they old? Were they young? Did they believe in God? Or was it just Mozart today? Or Schubert, sorry. Okay? You don't know any of those things. But you know he exists, or she exists. You know the violinist exists. If you know nothing else about the violinist, you know the violinist exists. You don't have to know the essence of the person playing the Ave to know that the person playing the Ave exists. Because if the person playing the Ave didn't exist, there'd be no Ave. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Okay. Reply objection 3. From effects not proportionate to the cause, no perfect knowledge of that cause can be obtained. Yet from every effect, the existence of the cause can be clearly demonstrated. And so we can demonstrate the existence of God from his effects, though from them we cannot perfectly know God as he is in his essence. So again, we can know God exists even if we don't know everything about him. Even if we don't know everything about him, we can know that he exists. So let's consider. A man is sitting in his kitchen table, reading the newspaper, when he hears a loud crash in the living room. Rushing there, he finds bits and pieces of glass covering his couch and all over the coffee table and carpet. He also finds a baseball in his living room floor. He looks out the window and sees no one around, only the scenery of his neighborhood on a bright, lovely summer day. Does the man conclude that the window shattered itself? Of course not. The evidence, hole in the window, glass all about, and a baseball on the floor, points from the effect, the shattered window, backward to the cause. Someone or something hurled the ball from outside the house through the window. Does he know who or what hurled the ball through this window? No. But he knows someone or something did. Balls don't hurl themselves about, occasionally taken out a window. So he knows that someone or something sent that ball through the window, even if he has no idea who or what it was. Maybe the wind, maybe a dog, maybe naughty boys playing baseball in the street when they shouldn't have been and their father told them not to. All right. So that's Aquinas' point, that we can argue from the cause, from the effects to the cause. Now, let's go to Article 3. Whether God exists. We proceed thus to the third article. It seems that God does not exist. What? You have to stop?
Another 5 minutes.
Okay. Just another 50 minutes. This won't take longer. All right, so we proceed thus to the third article. It seems that God does not exist. All right, so what do you already know about where Thomas is going to come down on this?
God exists.
That God exists, right? Because you know, the first proposition he offers is almost always the one he eventually opposes. And the first proposition he's offering here is, it seems that God does not exist. So you know automatically, eventually this guy's going to come around to the existence of God. Objection, argument 1. For if one of two contraries were infinite, the other would be altogether destroyed. But the word God means that he is infinite goodness. If therefore God exists, there would be no evil discoverable. But there is evil in the world, therefore God does not exist. Argument 2. Further, what can be accomplished by a few principles is not affected by many. But it seems that everything we see in the world can be accounted for by other principles. supposing God did not exist. For all natural things can be reduced to one principle, which is nature, and all voluntary things can be reduced to one principle, which is human reason or will. Therefore, there is no need to suppose God's existence. These are, if you haven't recognized them, the two classic arguments for atheism. The existence of evil, and the fact that we don't need God to explain anything. And if we don't need God to explain anything, there's no reason to presume his existence. On the contrary, it is said in the person of God, I am who am. Reply objection 1. He turns to St. Augustine. St. Augustine says, since God is the highest good, he would not allow any evil to exist in his works, unless his omnipotence and goodness was such as to bring good even out of evil. This is part of the infinite goodness of God, that he should allow evil to exist and out of it produce good. So, sorry, where am I? Here we go. Recall that the first objection is that God cannot exist because evil exists. So the first objection is that God cannot exist because evil exists. If God existed, he would necessarily be good. Thomas doesn't discount that. He absolutely agrees. But if God is good, he would not allow for the existence of evil. Evil exists, therefore God does not exist. Thomas doesn't have any problem with the first proposition, that if God exists, he is all good. He does have a problem with the second proposition, that if God is good, he would not allow the existence of evil. It does not necessarily follow that a good God would not allow the existence of evil. It does follow that a good God will ultimately bring good even out of evil. Okay? Now, Augustine says that since God is the highest good, he wouldn't allow evil to exist unless it was to bring about some good from the evil. This is central to Christian theology. For the greatest example of God bringing good out of evil is
Garden of Eden in the fall.
Crucifixion.
Jesus, the crucifixion of Jesus.
the passion, death, and the passion and death of Christ. Okay? The greatest example of God bringing good out of evil is the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross. An evil act that won for us our salvation. Even such, and the fall, you mentioned the fall. Every Easter, we sing at the Easter Vigil, "Oh, happy fault! Oh, felix culpa! Oh, happy fault! Oh, necessary sin of Adam that won for us so great a Savior." The atheist, however, must ask him or herself the question, is it really impossible for evil to exist in a world created by a good God? Are the two mutually exclusive? Many may be confused or angry over the existence of the two in the same reality. I can think of a number of reasons a good God may tolerate the existence of evil. Free will and the desire for a genuinely loving relationship with his people are the classic reasons. Love not freely given isn't love at all. Yet love freely given necessarily means the possibility of love not given. In the end, even the atheist must concede that concluding in favor of the non-existence of God contributes nothing toward the non-existence of evil.
We wouldn't know happiness if we didn't know its opposite.
Absolutely. That's absolutely. We wouldn't know where the high places are if there weren't any puddles. Okay? So even the atheist has to concede that the non-existence of God does nothing for the non-existence of evil. There's still evil in the world, even if you don't believe in God. Evil is here to stay. Essentially, the only difference between the long, dark tunnel in which the atheist finds himself and the long, dark tunnel in which the believer finds himself is that there is a light at the end of the believer's tunnel. That light is called hope. While many atheists would see it as nothing more than a coping mechanism, believers find great solace in the promise that if God can't be eliminated, it can be that if evil cannot be eliminated, it can be conquered and even redeemed. But only if God exists, and only if He's good. So if God does not exist, life's a bitch. And it's not a joke. That's the truth. That's the hard truth. It's not a joke. There's a lot about this world that just really sucks. And if there's no God, there's no hope, there's no redemption. Why do you get out of bed in the morning?
When you wake up.
Why do you wake up? Honestly, every person in this room over the age of 20 has hurt, and hurt bad. Can you imagine that world without hope? That world without redemption? Atheists do. And for some reason, they seem to think that that makes them smarter or brighter or more mature or more intellectually honest. I think it's depressing as hell.
What's there, I don't associate with atheists, that's just my personal philosophy and so forth. I pray for them, that's all I can do.
Yeah.
But I don't understand why live like that.
Yes?
What causes an atheist to become a Christian and believe in God? Because they do, they change all the time.
Yeah.
I've met many.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's what it comes to. I think it's the senselessness of it, the realization of the senselessness of it. I mean, think about it. You know, so much, this argument is basically an argument from anger. It's an argument from emotion. Think about it, it's a faith argument, right? It's not a rational argument, it's a faith argument. If God were God, then God would be like this. Okay, that's a faith proposition. That's not a rational, that's faith. Okay? All right, now, but I think, you know, and for so many of the atheists that I know are so angry. Okay? Babies die. Why? Children get sick. Why? I used to work at Children's Hospital, and we would see children with cancer. It's senseless. It's absolutely senseless. And I think what happens to a lot of them is that they realize that senselessness of it, and in some way it clicks from anger to hope, to having to make sense of it. Otherwise, I don't know, I would just go crazy. I would just go crazy, you know. And I think that that's what finally clicks, the senselessness of it all in the face of a tunnel with no light. Yeah.
For a significant amount of time in my life, I was an atheist.
Mm-hmm.
And in my case, it was a miracle of faith.
Yeah.
And it was a miracle of people praying for me, which is why it's so important for us to pray for others in the world, even people we don't know. Because when you're in that state, and I have 3 children, all my children are atheists, and I know the only thing is a miracle of prayer, a miracle of Mary calling you somehow miraculously to it. And I'm just thinking, who is the Father Donald Calloway? writes a very interesting book about his conversion from being an atheist, a drug addict, in trouble with the law all the time. It's just throwing the thought out there.
Yeah.
How does somebody ever convert from that? But they do, you know.
They do. Well, let's get to the second, Thomas Aquinas to the second objection. The second objection is that since everything that exists can be explained by natural causes or human causes, we don't need God to explain the existence of anything. Thomas answers by pointing out that there's at least one thing in nature that cannot be explained by natural or human causes, and that is that all things in nature that act toward a final end do so regularly. That is, always or almost always. It is this regularity that must be explained, not the randomness that we also find in nature. Thomas explains that this regularity, this purposeful acting toward final ends, must be directed by a higher agent, one who is not directed by any other. Otherwise, if everything could indeed be explained by natural causes, we would have no regularity at all, only random, haphazard ends, as we might see in the pattern of sand dunes created by the wind, or the pattern of rocks at the foot of a mountain after an avalanche. But that's not what we observe in the natural order. The regularity we do observe must be explained. Thomas shows that the existence of God is not only the best explanation for the regularity we observe in nature, but the only explanation. Why? Could not the process of evolution, of natural selection, explain the regularity we see in living things? Actually, just the opposite. The process of natural selection presumes the regularity in nature. Consider that long-necked giraffes survived while short-necked giraffes died out, because the long-necked giraffes could reach the vegetation at the top of the trees that the short-necked giraffes couldn't. But their survival depends on the regularity of long-necked giraffes mating and producing other long-necked giraffes, and not short-necked giraffes. If the result of mating was random-necked giraffes, there could be no such thing as natural selection. There could be no such thing as natural selection. Natural selection proves the regularity of nature, not the randomness of it. Okay? When you have a species with an advantageous adaptation, okay, an advantageous adaptation against a species that does not have that advantageous adaptation, what's going to happen? The one without the adaptation is going to die, and the one with the adaptation is going to survive. But only if there are other members of the species that also possess that advantageous adaptation, and they reproduce and they create children with that advantageous adaptation. Okay? So in other words, if Margaret, if my wife and I, okay, procreated and out popped a kangaroo, everybody would say, "Oh, that doesn't happen." It doesn't happen. The kangaroos, boy kangaroo and girl kangaroos, have baby kangaroos, not baby hippopotami. That's the regularity of nature. Okay? We exist on this planet because there are physical laws that rule our universe. If those physical laws didn't exist and weren't consistent and regular, we wouldn't exist. Well, don't those physical laws explain why we exist? No, because physical laws only describe nature, they don't cause nature. You realize that? Physical laws. If I jump up, I'm going to come down. Why? Because of the physical law of gravity. But that doesn't cause me to come back down. It describes the activity. Okay? It doesn't cause my existence. Okay? And, gravity isn't the reason I exist. Okay? It's the law in which my existence dwells. It describes, it helps. It's one of the laws that describes my existence, but it doesn't cause my existence. So, Thomas shows that the existence of God, okay, wait a minute, where we are? All right. As well, natural selection can't explain the regularity in non-living objects, such as the boiling point of water, the creation of water molecules from 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen atoms, and the orbit of the planet and other celestial bodies. Can the laws of physics explain such things? No, possibly, but the laws of physics describe reality. They don't cause reality or create reality. Natural and human causes utterly fail in explaining the ultimate origins of all that exists. Never mind why there is something rather than nothing. These are philosophical questions. In answering these questions, philosophy turns necessarily to God as the final end of it all. Okay? So Thomas says the one thing that nature can't answer or can't explain is nature. The existence and regularity of nature. There has to be something beyond it.
The Big Bang Theory.
Well, that's nature.
But what caused it to be
What
bad?
caused it? What caused it? Yeah, exactly. Now, the physical laws describe what happened to the elements after the Big Bang Theory.
That's God's
Okay.
clockmaker, right? Isn't that the theory?
Well, yeah, but there's some problems with that theory.
Yeah, I'm
And
aware.
Catholic, Thomas is a lot deeper than
I get it.
the clock theory, but the clock